Grinding Gear Games yesterday released a massive 1.5-hour stream detailing a ton of information about Path of Exile 2, its early access, and what you're going to be playing. So this video is going to be your best source of information on what to know to get started December 6th when you play Path of Exile 2. First things first, you're going to be given 6 classes out of the actual full 12 for early access. You're going to get the Monk, the Warrior, the Ranger, the Mercenary, the Sorceress, and the Witch. Each one of these classes has anywhere between 20 to 25 actual skills that you can use. You then combo those skills, and there are tons of ways to work through. I'm not going to go over each and every specific one, but let's just say a lot of the skills that you've wanted to see inside of PoE 1 are definitely in PoE 2, and that's always going to be a very cool thing. Now, one thing that you're going to be noticing as well is flasks. Well, they're basically gone. You get a guaranteed life flask and a guaranteed mana flask. And instead of having utility flasks on top of that, you're actually going to use trinkets instead. These trinkets will then apply their effects on top of you whenever you have enough charges, and they'll automatically set themselves directly. So you basically have a mini mage blood anytime you want while you're playing the game. To make things even better though, certain belts in the game will also increase the amount of trinkets you can actually carry, so those will be incredibly powerful as well. So really, having a mana flask and a life flask is always going to be good, but then having those trinkets on top of that for utility is even better. We basically removed the whole piano playing thing or the automatic flask thing, or trying to find a mage blood and actually get an actual belt on you that actually does the things you want them to do, which is honestly really nice. But on top of changing flasks, on top of having 6 classes, you were also getting Ascendancies as well. We're not getting all 3 though. We're just going to get 2 Ascendancies for each class. So basically 12 total classes in game. These Ascendancies are incredibly powerful. They completely change every class, and they're not just like additional to what you're trying to do. They are completely game changing in the kind of class you're actually going to play. The way they've designed this is honestly wild, and I feel like it's incredibly overtuned and very powerful, especially with some of the things that they've been showing. But really, it's going to be that kind of game, and I'm kind of excited about it as well. Because honestly, the thing that people are really worried about the most is the movement speed and the clear speed inside of PoE 2. And I can definitely say from what I saw yesterday, that's not going to be a problem. You're going to move hella fast in this game. You're going to clear screens in this game. You're actually going to be able to do the thing that you've wanted to do. It's just going to be a lot more dangerous, a lot more impactful, and you're not going to be able just to tap one button and just play that game directly. So you're going to have to play the video game. Now, there will be one button builds, I'm totally sure of it. But the thing is, it's much more interactive and much more action focused rather than just passively playing like you normally see in PoE 1. So I'm very excited about the fact that we're going to be moving quick. We're going to be zooming, blasting, and moving. And the thing is, that's one of the big things I was worried about from moving to PoE 1 to PoE 2. Crafting has also completely changed from PoE 1 to PoE 2. Their idea is they want you to be able to craft more from items that are on the ground rather than trying to find bases specifically. So Exalted Orbs have changed, Transmutations Orbs have changed. Everything has basically just changed, because what they do now is they add those specific prefixes or suffixes rather than anything else. And it gives you the ability to actually craft those items from the ground and actually look for items on the ground rather than just filtering everything out and then having nothing on screen at all. Now, on top of that though, we're back to Diablo 2, baby, because we've got sockets onto gear. Not like sockets like we had in PoE 1, but actual sockets where you would apply runes into those sockets specifically to increase any kind of stat you were looking for, whether it's increased health or resistance or things like that. And it's really great to see. Now, chest pieces can have 2 sockets. Every other piece of armor gets 1 socket, but you can also corrupt those pieces of items to have an additional socket as well as a random modifier. So we're going to see a couple of things happen with Vol Orbs too. And speaking of Vol Orbs and currency and anything along that nature, gold is in fact back into the game. And yes, the currency exchange is going to be there day 1, baby. I am excited to see that as well. And I hope they keep that in PoE 1 as well and move that to standard, because it is so necessary to make the player experience even better and raise the floor for everybody to enjoy the kind of content. Now, speaking of content, going back to Ascension trials, they are going to be changing things on how lab works specifically for your Ascension class. What they're going to be doing is basically just giving you the ability to choose between Sanctum and Ultimatum when you want to pick your Ascension. So if you're not good at Sanctum, you can do Ultimatum. If you don't like Ultimatum, you can do Sanctum. So melee bros really won't have a problem. The difference though is Sanctum really didn't change much specifically. What they did was they gave you Honor, which you would then use as your life resource inside of Sanctum. But at the same time though, Ultimatum has changed quite drastically. You're not given a small circle anymore in the map. You're actually given a large room to work through and have enough ability to move around and do things along that nature. This is where chat was kind of split across the middle. We saw a lot of logouts. We saw a lot of logins. That's going to be dependent upon what you like to do. I don't know what the third trial is going to be. Hopefully it's going to be something good, and hopefully it'll be a way of providing you a good way of doing a trial that people may not like Sanctum or Ultimatum can do something else instead that'll be more of a classic favorite. Maybe they'll just bring labs back specifically, but I'm not entirely sure because them pulling a lot of original content from the Atlas tree and endgame content from PoE 1 to make it core standard part of the campaign in PoE 2 leaves a couple of things open. One, maybe you don't like that kind of content. That'll be kind of tough to choose. And two, they're not going to have 3 open ways of providing additional endgame content that we may not have seen before. So that'll be nice as well. Now, speaking of endgame content, here's how the campaign is actually going to be structured and actually work. What you're going to be having during early access is campaigns 1 through 3 are going to be available to you. And Jonathan Rogers said it'll take around 25 to 50 hours for a new player to complete those 3 acts. The thing is though, once you're done with those 3 acts, they're not going to give you the acts of 4, 5, and 6. You're going to be getting instead the cruel version of the first 3 acts to replay again to get to level 65 and then do the end game maps. They'll be adding in the rest of the campaign during full release in acts 4, 5, and 6, but I'm kind of concerned about this as well. The length of time it's going to take to complete the first 3 acts and then the actual last 3, we're looking at around a 35 to 40 hour campaign if you're pretty good at it completely and you actually know what you're doing. And I don't know how that's going to function in terms of every season or every few months where you have to redo that entire campaign again, unless you do a campaign skip to go right into endgame and do it from that perspective. And talking about endgame though, that Atlas tree is honestly wild to me. It almost seemed like a 4X game, to be honest, but it's very similar to Last Epoch, actually. There's a lot of corruption all over the place, and you get to choose which map and which way you decide to go in that area during the Atlas, and then clear that corruption through that. Now, the thing is, though, if you die in the map, then you don't have the ability to go back and do that map again. That area is locked off and you have to go around the area in the Atlas to find another way of clearing out that corruption, which honestly seems kind of cool. It's very similar to, like I said, Last Epoch's endgame of clearing the corruption inside that area too. But the thing is though, things can change because you have waystones that you then apply all over the map directly or to those maps specifically. Basically, your Atlas is now ever evolving, ever expanding, and almost never ending, and you can constantly just apply waystones which you can craft onto to create difficult bosses or difficult maps or difficult areas or different suffixes and prefixes, and then run through that directly. So you can do all that kind of stuff and roll your maps with waystones and then apply them directly and then run that map and then go from there. Now this has also changed as well because the only way you can clear the corruption in that map is if you kill every rare and every unique enemy in that map. So you can't just zoom all the way to the end and be done with it. You're going to be having to do quite a few clears of that map to make sure you get all those rares and all those unique enemies to then have that corruption removed and then have that map be completed. That's a very different strategy of what we saw before, and that also kind of explains why there's only a map boss out of 1 in every 4 maps. And every map boss has a specific icon designated for that map specifically. So you're not always going to have a map boss at the end of every map. It's going to be in 1 of every 4, and then you'll fight that boss directly from the campaign into the map itself with specific modifiers and changes and become more difficult is what they've said. Some other big changes though that I've noticed is that shrines are no longer just active when you do it. You have to clear the mobs around the shrine first, which will then give you the ability to click that shrine and then move from there. Strong boxes are back as well, which you can craft on. And yes, Detonate Dead is also on the strong box, so just be aware of that. Essences are also back on top of that in early access, and they are corrupted essences. Now that has actually changed from the original game. They're no longer shrieking, screaming, or what have you. Now it's just Essence of Ice or Essence of Haste. And the modifiers of the essence will be like Greater Essence or things like that. So you're not going to have to worry about whether it's woe or anything else like that. It's very easy to read and understand what this essence will in fact do. And you can just say, okay, here's how it's going to work. And that's a really nice thing on top of that too. Now, the Atlas skill tree is going to have 7 different specific skill trees inside of it directly. So we're not going to have one giant skill tree when you're having the Atlas skill tree. You're going to have 7 different ones that you can work through, each with its own amount of skill points available to you, and then you can apply those in there. So you can then complete the kind of content you want and actually have that content be there continuously. So Breach is available inside of the actual early access. So you can do your Breach, you can then do your Trials, you can then do Expedition, which is also there. You can also do Ritual, you can do Delirium, and each one of those has its own specific skill tree, so you're not going to have to sit around and figure out if I have to remove points from one part of the Atlas tree to put it into another to then actually have the ability to do the thing and then sacrifice what I want to do. You can just do the actual content that you want, have the points that you earn from doing that content applied to its own specific skill tree, and then just play the game directly, basically giving you an infinite number of ways to play and an infinite number of content to do. And this is just specifically with early access. This is not with the whole everything at the end. So you're looking at like thousands of hours of content available to you without having to worry about removing points, creating new trees for that, creating other ways of doing that. Everything is segregated to its own little area of tree specifically, and then you can modify that directly and then do whatever you want with that kind of content, which honestly is such a great idea. It's so fantastic because it doesn't just throw a giant Atlas skill tree at you. You don't really know where to go. In reality, you would just pick the nodes that have that kind of endgame content you wanted to do anyways. You were just trying to figure out a way to get in there without spending as much points as possible. Now, on top of all of that as well, besides the content that they've added for Endgame, the campaign that they've put in, the Ascendancy classes, and the Atlas tree that's basically ever expanding and basically just never ending, they've also added Uber bosses on top of that. The way to get to these Uber bosses is there are 3 factions inside of your Atlas map, which you then have to go through and fight all specific lieutenants to get to the Uber pinnacle boss of that faction. And then once you defeat that boss, you then get a keystone to apply into a tower. There are 3 keystones that you have to get. Then once you go into that, you then find a tower that you have to clear out that has a maze inside of it that has another set of bosses inside of that as well. So there's content. There's all kinds of content. This is just an early access. This is incredibly impressive. I was very tepid and kind of worried about the way PoE 2 would play, but the fact that it's incredibly combo heavy, the fact that you can still clear screens, the fact that you can still move quickly and feel good about blasting like in PoE 1, the fact that there's so many other ways of providing newer players with better experiences and overall just better quality of life, the fact that the currency exchange is there, the way they've applied gold for respecking is there, the way that the end game is now done with like that flavor from last epoch that was really good, and then just expanding upon that with the PoE twist. Everything just feels so right, and it feels like what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is basically just kill off Path of Exile 1. That's kind of what this feels like, because when you go back and you listen to what they were talking about, they were just trying to roll PoE 2 into PoE 1, but the changes were so great they had to separate it. That's what this feels like, because this feels like what they were trying to do is say, well, PoE 1 doesn't exist anymore, it's just PoE. And that's why this is so, in my opinion, grandiose. I don't know what they're going to do to make you want to play PoE 1 when this game comes out, if they're able to hit every mark that they've talked about, if the game launches well, and it has everything that it needs from early access into its actual planned release. Unless seasons are like 6 months, then I don't know if I would even log back into PoE 1 if they do everything right and the way they're talking about it. It's kind of crazy that the only way to actually beat Path of Exile 1 is for GGG to make Path of Exile 2. Actually, you know what this feels like? This feels like going from Diablo 1 to Diablo 2. That's exactly what this feels like. Just this huge jump in everything and just this massive overhaul across everything. And I'm honestly very excited about this, and I really can't wait. I've already got my supporter pack ready. I did not spend the $500. No, I spent $30, and I'm ready for December 6th. I'm going to be streaming it live on this channel, so get ready for that. We are going to do a lot of play testing. I'm going to try and build a bunch of guides for this game as I possibly can, and then go from there. So definitely sit back, relax, enjoy the content. If you want to see more, subscribe. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time.